All right, so I'm going to ask Simon, just spend a few time asking Simon a few questions. And so Simon, if we think Japan, we think busy intersections, or we might think Mount Fuji, or manga, or anime. You're living in Japan to share the gospel message.
Yes.
Why Japan?
Why Japan? It's a big question. We are learning Daniel, God's sovereignty. God is sovereign. Why Japan? I can say because of God's sovereignty. I was born in Korea and grew up in Korea. I studied Japanese at university in Korea. But I never thought using Japanese for God's mission. I chose it for my own benefit. I came to Australia for the same reason. If I spoke English well, I could get a better job. That's why I came to Australia. But I met Jesus Christ here in Australia and reminded that my major was Japanese. So like Daniel was forced to move to Babylon, but he was chosen to be there. I chose to be here, to come to Australia for my own benefit. But I realized it. I was chosen to be sent to Japan for God's glory. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So tell us about where you live in Japan and some of the work that you're doing over there.
Yes, we can see the port. Yeah. It's a very rural area. You may know some Osaka and Tokyo. And Osaka is further north. It's quite a rural area. So next slide, please. It's quite famous for tulips. And then about 48,000 people live there. Most of them are agricultural industry, work for agricultural things. So in winter, it's quite cold. The next street. Yeah. So for 2 months or so, we need hard work to remove all snows. And there are, the next slide, please, that in Japan, Buddhism and Shintoism is quite strong. Shintoism, there's Shinto priest there. People, for example, buy a new car, they brought the car to him, and then he will bless the car. So that's the photo. So Shintoism very much focus on the life here in this world, and Buddhism much more focus on the world after death. Next slide. We have a English class for kids. God even used my broken English. So we have 40 to 50 kids. Each week we can meet, and then their parents as well. Not only teaching English, we give them some barbecue and pizza party. And then the next slide, we have an English camp. So many people come and enjoy their English, and then we have a chance to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Even every Christmas time, we have a Christmas party, so we share the real meaning of Christmas. Many Japanese people, they don't know the real meaning of Christmas. They just thought present and cake, that's all for them. But it's really a good opportunity for us to share the good news of Jesus Christ at Christmas time. Next slide. One of the highlights is that we had a short-term mission team from Ash Grove Baptist, it's Brisbane. So it was really a good time, and then the kids and mom, the Japanese kids and mom, they really enjoyed the camp as well. Next slide is that we even enjoyed the bush dance together. So more than 60 people came and enjoyed the English camp. That's what we've been doing. But I can say it's always not easy. We really have a good relationship with the locals, but it's some struggling. We are struggling, bringing them to Jesus Christ, them to the church. Please pray for that.
So Simon, you mentioned there's roughly 48,000 people living in the city where you live. How many Christians would there be, roughly?
I think less than 50. Yeah.
So I just want to pick up on that point, right? So 50 Christians in their city, 6 of them are here at TeenStreet, and we saw them up on stage. So more than 10% of all the Christians in the city where they live are here at TeenStreet, right? And I really want to hammer this point home, right? So 50 Christians in a city of, let's say 50,000 people. So can we just have the lights on the audience? So we've got roughly 500 people here, right? So imagine double this amount of people. So imagine all of this here was also full of people. One of us would be a Christian, right? So let's get someone to stand up. Do you mind standing up? Yeah. She would be the only Christian. So someone in the back there, how are you ever going to hear the gospel? Look how far away you are from how are you ever going to hear the good news of Jesus? How is she ever going to tell the whole room about Jesus? And remember, this room actually has to be double the size to represent the city where these guys are living. And I don't know about you, TeenStreet, but I'm not okay with this. I'm not okay that there's a city in the world where someone will not hear the gospel. Not that they haven't believed in Jesus because they've rejected him. They don't believe in Jesus because no one's ever told them, because there's no one there to tell them. So Simon, what can we do about it?
Yeah, I like the TeenStreet praise, go deep, be bold, and have fun. So think about around you, look at around you, not here, but there should be someone who are not familiar with this culture, Australia, even English, like me. So be bold to be friends with them. You should get out of your comfort zone and have fun each other's company. You will enjoy the other culture's good things. And if you want to go further, go deeper, please pray for someone who working cross-culturally in overseas. Get a letter from them. You will understand much deeper. And then be bolder to join short-term mission. OM Japan has some short-term mission program, and then be missionaries to Japan. You will have much more fun. Yeah.
Thank you, Simon. If you want to hear more, if what Simon has said has sort of stirred something and you want to hear more about Japan, he's going to be sharing more about what they do, showing more photos. The whole family, I think, will be in Next Move tonight during Interact 3. So come along and hear more stories tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it coming through? It is coming through. Wonderful. It's working. Why don't we take, it's probably a good time to, I mean, I'm sure they'll be thanked later, but these guys are killing it. Hey, the production team, hey, smashing it out of the park. This evening, we are zeroing in on a character called John the Baptist. We know that John the Baptist pops up in the New Testament, but he's actually talked about in the Old Testament. In fact, he's talked about in the final verses of the Old Testament as a critical player in the person who will prepare the way for the Messiah, who we know is Jesus Christ. And in the final verses of Malachi chapter 4, it says, "See, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes." Now, this is actually talking about this man, John the Baptist, who is going to come and prepare the way for the Messiah. And so John the Baptist was the son of Zechariah and Elizabeth. It's an amazing story. God seems to like to see really old couples have babies in their old age. It happened with Abraham and Sarah. It happens with Zechariah and Elizabeth. It's crazy. And John the Baptist grows up as this man who was chosen for a very special role. And as far as roles get, it doesn't really get much bigger than this as a human, to prepare the world for the Messiah, the climax moment of history, Jesus. And we also learn that he was a pretty wild character. It's described here in Matthew chapter 3 that John's clothes were made out of camel's hair, and he had a leather belt around his waist. His food was locusts and wild honey. People went out to him from Jerusalem and all Judea and the whole region of the Jordan. Confessing their sins, they were baptized by him in the Jordan River. We know that he was a prophet. He's sort of mentioned as being alongside one of the last, well, he's like the last Old Testament prophet. And he was a fiery character. He would say some pretty controversial things. People coming to hear him preach from all over the place. He called Jewish religious leaders and Pharisees, the Sadducees as well, a brood of vipers. Way to win friends and influence people. Maybe don't do that, but he was speaking the truth. He would rebuke people. People were being convicted of sin as he preached as well, and they would get baptized. And by all accounts, he had a successful ministry. People from all over the place were coming to listen to him preach from great distances. But what I want to ask this evening is, what is it that made John the Baptist successful? Was it the size of the crowds that came out to hear him? What was it? His effective communication strategies, his zeal, his passion? Was it his clothing, his choice of attire? What was it that made him successful? He was a gifted person. God was using him. People were repenting of their sin. And so I want to ask the question tonight, what is success? How do we define success for us even as Christians? Well, as I was trying to find out what success is, I looked up a few quotes, and I think we've got some here. True success is overcoming the fear of being unsuccessful. That was one that was written by Paul Sweeney. Not sure who he is, but that's an interesting quote. Success is only meaningful and enjoyable if it feels like your own. That's from Michelle Obama. That's interesting, isn't it? I attribute my success to this: I never gave or took any excuse. That's Florence Nightingale. And then I think I've got one more there as well as far as success. It says, it's a game of two halves. Credit to the boys. They trained hard and deserved the win. And that's every rugby league player ever. Anyone know that? I don't know if it's on the screen. We missed it. We live in a world that is obsessed with success. We are wanting to be efficient and productive constantly. And it's so powerful, it's just ingrained into our thinking. So much so that this idea of success becomes central to our identity. We know it, don't we? If we're not busy, if we don't have lots of followers or likes or whatever, we're not really successful. We don't really meet the criteria of what success is. And there are standards, whether explicit or implicit. We tend to know who the successful people are and who those that aren't so successful are. For example, at the moment, someone who I guess in the world, the world would regard as the top of the success chain would be someone like Taylor Swift. She's been at it, she's been working hard for a long time, producing music, and now lots and lots of people want to come and see her at her concerts, like crashing Ticket Tech or whatever. And so we as people naturally equate that with success. But let's bring it back to our friend John the Baptist. He's got a big following. People are being impacted by what he's doing, but then something happens. And people start unfollowing him. And we read about it in John 3:25. It says, an argument developed between some of John's disciples and a certain Jew over the matter of ceremonial washing. They came to John and said to him, Rabbi, that man, he's talking about Jesus, who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you testified about, look, he is baptizing and everyone is going to him. The disciples, John's disciples, are panicking. Our success isn't looking so successful anymore. What are you going to do about it, John? It's not looking good. Doesn't look like success when people are unfollowing you. So it sounds like this is heading towards failure. Don't say the F word. We don't want failure. So how will he turn it around? Well, how does John respond? What does he say? He says, a person can receive only what is given them from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Messiah, but am sent ahead of him. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine. And it is now complete. He must become greater. I must become less. Oh. Now that's a bit of a mic drop moment. Instead of trying to win back followers and be successful, John celebrates the departure of these followers. And he can do this because he knows who Jesus is. He knows the job that he's been given alongside that. And his job is that he is not the Messiah, but he's been sent ahead of him. He has a very specific role. And this clarity is so important to us as disciples of Jesus as well. We aren't Jesus. Our job isn't to gather followers of us, but to make followers of Jesus. This clarity meant John wasn't concerned about the apparent decline in personal followers because it's not about him, it's all about Jesus. We also see here that John understands and embraces that his life, this life, is not about him, it's entirely connected to Jesus. Now, I didn't get married until I was 31 years old. And so that's pretty old, isn't it? So there's a significant period of time when you get invited to be asked to be a groomsman and a best man on a number of occasions. That happened before I got married. Now, it would be easy for me to become a little bit jaded over the years after just getting repeatedly asked to be on wedding parties and just becoming a bit sour because I'm not the groom. You know, what do they say? Twice a groomsman, never a groom. Is that how it goes?
Always a groomsman, never a groom.
Okay, I actually think I got it completely wrong. It's not that. But that can be, like, imagine if that's what it was for me. I just got a bit sour. And in fact, there was one day where I just had enough. I was a groomsman, and we had the wedding photos, and you can tell from the wedding photos that I was pretty ticked off. You can see it a bit closer. I was just over it. I just didn't want to be a groomsman anymore. So I actually ruined all their photos. Because it was about me. It's about my happiness, isn't it? No, that didn't actually happen. That was photoshopped. You wouldn't believe it. Wouldn't believe it, hey. This thing, technology, the internet, it's an amazing thing. I've got no idea who those people were. But they do look like lovely people. They look like, and they were having a good time. But you got to be careful because you could become a bit sour. But this was not the case for John the Baptist. He uses the metaphor of a bridal party and positions himself as the perpetual best man. Isn't that amazing? The bride belongs to the bridegroom. He's the friend who attends the bridegroom, waits and listens for him, and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. Now, in a Jewish marriage, back in that time, the friend of the bridegroom was critically responsible for leading the bridegroom to the bride. And he was absolutely part of the joyful celebration connected to that union. And the point we need to highlight is that the friend rejoices in the groom's joy. He lives to serve and please the groom. He's not the star of the show. He knows his role. John will never be the groom. He will never be the Messiah. His job is to point people to the Messiah and help people follow Jesus. And one of the things that is most astonishing about John's response is that he completely undermines the principles of what we would see as worldly success. He says it in verse 30. He must become greater, I must become less. Now, if you were to go searching through the leadership or the business books today, you don't see marketing gurus celebrating the loss of social media support or likes. It's just not there. They probably would lose their job. So what about being successful? Because John here affirms his role is to become less, not greater. But what if it's not about success? What if the world's idea of success is exactly what God doesn't want? What if actually we're not called to be successful, but to be faithful? What if actually Christianity is not about winning, but about doing simply what Jesus wants? Whether the world thinks it's winning or successful or not. You see, one of the crazy things about the story of John the Baptist is that after an amazing start to his ministry, big crowds coming to listen to him, they start to leave him. He loses his influence. But then it gets worse. He loses his freedom. He's thrown into jail because of his preaching. And then one day, whilst John is in his jail cell, presumably alone, he loses his very own life. Beheaded in obscurity because of a vow made at a wild party. It's absolutely tragic and looks nothing like worldly success. But again, remember, that's not what John the Baptist was on about. He said it himself. He must become greater and I must become less. John wasn't living to the beat of the world's idea of success. He was pursuing faithfulness. And what is remarkable about John's life is that at the height of ministry success, he was secure and free. And this is the wonderful thing about faithfulness over success. When you embrace faithfulness, there is a newfound freedom whether the world thinks you're successful or not. So here was John preaching and lots of big crowds coming to hear him preach. Even the world's going, he's successful, but he's free. He doesn't care about what the world thinks because he's wanting to be faithful to Jesus. And then the followers start to leave him. And he's still free. He's still secure. It's okay. He must increase, I must decrease. I'm free because he's not bowing to the world's idea of success. He's choosing faithfulness to Jesus. And that's part of the plan. And then even when his freedom is taken from him, ultimately, he's able to be secure even in that moment because he's not pursuing success. He's seeking to be faithful to his master, the Lord Jesus Christ. Can you see how faithfulness frees you from the bondage, from how the world's idea of success can actually crush you? It can destroy you because you're constantly asking the question, well, am I successful? I don't know if I'm being successful right now. I just don't know. But when you go for faithfulness, when you're like, well, I'm going to go to God's word. This is what God's word says. This is what he's calling me to do. I'm just going to be faithful, whether the world thinks it's successful or not. And that brings a level of freedom for John, even in the most difficult of situations. Because we don't view life as success or failure anymore, but as being faithful to the King, King Jesus. And this evening, I want you to know that what the world says success is and what faithfulness to Jesus looks like are two very different things. And my hope and prayer tonight is that truth might bring a level of freedom into your world. Because we are hearing all sorts of voices at this moment about what effective influence is and what success looks like. Did you know that Jesus is always watching when no one else is? He sees when no one else sees and rejoices over the things that no one else values that you're doing when you're being faithful. The moments when you say no to temptation, he sees the moments when you choose faithfulness over comfort. He sees it and he rejoices. The moments you experience loneliness, even in your schoolyard, maybe you feel isolated because you are a Christian. He's watching and he's celebrating because you're being faithful. Even for those of us here who, leaders, even tonight, you may feel like your job, what am I doing? It feels insignificant. But Jesus is watching. And he celebrates faithfulness. Jesus is looking for faithful disciples. And this is really, really important, because at the end of our lives, there will come a day when we will stand before Jesus. And it really comes down to this: the most important words that we could hear are not, "Well done, good and successful person," but "Well done, good and faithful servant." TeenStreet, Jesus is calling you to be faithful to him and to leave the rest up to him.